And it's a United Methodist hymnal that on page 316. Remember John 3:16? There is a hymn that was never in the hymnal before, because in this hymnal, this is copyrighted 1964 and 1966. Now you remember that the United Methodist Church was born in 1968. Well, when the United Brethren in Christ and the EUBs came into the scene, we added into the hymnal 3:16, He rose. When we first got to Africa in Sierra Leone, we were in Africa in 1952 in Nigeria, but not in Sierra Leone until 1957. That's 61 years ago. We went up to Kaima. Now, I was talking with Clyde about Kaima, and he remembers that the Walkers served there as well as the Bradfords. Kaima is north of Kingdom of Colonial Land, but there are people there, and we had an outreach from Rotafunk, so we packed up all our instruments and we went up to Kaima to do surgery. We did a lot of surgery. In those days, it was general surgery, hernias and things like that. There was a school, a United Methodist school. It wasn't really United Methodist at that time, but there was a school of the EUBs. And when we appeared at that school, the teacher was not only the teacher, he was the pastor of that school. And when we came, he had the children stand and sing a song. They sang this song, page 316, He Rose. I had never heard it before. It was thrilling. And after just hearing it once, we kept singing. I'd like to have Clyde come up here for a moment. Would you, Clyde, and tell us a separate experience of similar nature? What happened when you visited? Was it Moyemba? Was it the school for girls?
Tayama.
Where was it?
It was in Tayama.
It was in Tayama. Had you ever heard this song before?
I had never heard the song before.
What happened?
I was in Tayama on a Sunday. I don't remember the exact year. I lived either in Bow or in Freetown at the time. But in the afternoon, for some reason, I met with a group of girls from the secondary school in a youth fellowship meeting. And they sang this song, He Rose, He Rose. I heard it for the very first time, and whenever I hear it, I think of that first experience. I have no idea who it was that introduced the song.
Yes.
Maybe the Malcolms.
No,
We
heard it.
But then later in Tayama, several years later, when Gladys and I were living in Tayama, we had the New Life for All McKinney, and the Reverend Marion Birch of the Wesleyan Church joined us, and we established a practice of concerned persons meeting every morning in the area of the clinic, and there would be some singing and more prayer, but He Rose was sung again from time to time in those early morning prayer meetings, daily prayer meetings.
Thank you. I just want to give you a little background, because once you hear it today, you're never going to forget it. Now, I thought that very likely it originated in Africa. And lo and behold, if you look at the bottom of 316, it says, Afro-American spiritual. So it did originate. Who knows? It could have been Sierra Leone.
Could have been.
We're going to ask Linda to play it through once, but before she does, I want you to look at those words. They crucified my Savior and nailed him to the tree. And you repeat that several times. And then comes that chorus. He rose, he rose, he rose from the dead. And the Lord shall bear my spirit home. Would you play for us?
I will.
My phone went off one time when the preacher was preaching.
Oops.
And at that same moment, a lady, just 2 people over from me, hers went off at the same time. They all looked at her.
It's a new definition of grace.
Well, we had one go
Just
off
give
and
us
they
a
said,
little tour.
we sang this.
Let's sing.
They crucified my Savior and nailed him to the tree. They crucified my Savior and nailed him to the tree. They crucified my Savior and nailed him to the tree. And the Lord will bear my spirit home. He rose, he rose, he rose, he rose from the dead. He rose, he rose, he rose, he rose from the dead. He rose, he rose, he rose, he rose from the dead. And the Lord will bear my spirit home.
Let's continue.
And Joseph begged his body and laid it in the tomb. Then Joseph begged his body and laid it in the tomb. Then Joseph begged his body and laid it in the tomb. And the Lord will bear my spirit home. He rose, he rose, he rose from the dead. He rose, he rose, he rose from the dead. He rose, he rose, he rose from the dead. And the Lord will bear my spirit home.
worst time. We are living in the worst time for persecution of Christians in human history. It all started with, they crucified my Savior and held him to a tree. That was the beginning. Following that, Stephen was martyred. 11 of the 12 apostles were martyred. Only John escaped to write the Gospel, 3 letters, and Revelation. And when John was writing, he had the vision of Jesus sending messages to churches. Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamon, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. But only one of those churches escaped a judgment of needing to repent, and that was Smyrna. And that was because they were being persecuted. When Jesus was confronted by Pilate, Pilate said, "What shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" Perhaps that's the most important question that was ever raised in history. What shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ? And they all said, "Let him be crucified, killed." But Pilate then responded, "Why? What evil has he done?" The chief priests, elders, and persuaded mob then cried out, "Let him be crucified." Well, Pilate saw that he was not going to handle this mob. And so finally he says, "Do what you want to do." And they took out Jesus. And they crucified our Lord. That's not the end of the story, because he rose. He rose from the dead. Down through the ages, we have grasped that atoning power of Christ to save. It was very clear that this man without sin, as Pilate said, he's without fault, took upon himself the sin of the world, which includes you and me. After the apostles, there were 100,000 followers of Jesus that were martyred by the year 3013, when Constantine arrived on the scene. And you would have thought that that would have ended the death of those who followed Jesus. But down through the ages, those persecutions have continued. And you see that Jesus even foresaw this, because in Matthew, the 5th chapter, Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And then Paul follows up. He said, "Who shall separate us from the love of God?" And he includes all the hardships, famine, nakedness, danger, sword, and persecutions. And Paul then said, "Shall we be separated? No. In all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us." And And then he further said, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. And in fact, he summed it all up in Timothy, that verse in 3:12. In fact, he says, according to the NIV, in fact, everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ will be persecuted. Nero did his worst, followed by Diocletian, who perhaps was even more involved in persecution. And then it continued in the Middle Ages, and all of us are aware what happened in the 7th century with the rise of Islam. Northern Africa was Christian. Augustine was born in Carthage in Tunisia. But today, if you go to Tunisia, 99% of that country is Muslim. The reason for this is, according to Rabbi Zacharias, the Muslim group are not the fastest growing church or religion or faith in this present age. It's only that they have their feet on the necks of people that convert or else. And you and I know what has been happening in Iraq, Iran, and Syria, and all these places where ISIS has taken hold. There has been a genocide. But even further in the Middle Ages and following in 1712 and so on, there was the French Revolution. And then in China, the Boxer Rebellion, Sun Yat-sen, India can be very viral against Christians. Even today, Christians are killed in India. And in this modern era of 1850 to 1989, there has been literally a genocide going on for the Armenians, for the Assyrians, for the Greeks. And then 1917, the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks killed over 500,000 of the Eastern Orthodox Christians. But those who are aware of the current situation are to be informed that persecution is not over. In fact, at the present age, we have the worst persecution of the Christian church and Christians in human history. Over 100,000 people are killed every year. There are over 210 million Christians who are living in places where they cannot express their faith and who are second and third class citizens. You may not be aware that except for North Korea, which is the mother of all persecution, where people are killed by hanging them on a cross over a fire and labor camps and so on, the next 8 countries of the world are all Muslim dominated. We have to keep our eyes open that we are a church that is being throttled and fighting for its life in the Middle East. The places that were Christian no longer are Christian. They are under the aegis, the authority of a different faith. We have been promised that there will be crucifixions, yes, persecutions. I want Melanie to come and read something that you don't hear from my voice.
This is an article on Christian persecution written May and June of this year. Christian persecution is the worst it has ever been, according to a recent study by a Christian persecution watchdog, Aid to the Church in Need, or ACN. In terms of the numbers of people involved, the gravity of the crimes committed and their impact, it is clear that the persecution of Christians is today worse than at any time in history. Not only are Christians more persecuted than any other faith group, but ever-increasing numbers are experiencing the very worst forms of persecution, ACN reported. Today, more than 200 million Christians in 60 countries experience imprisonment, torture, and death for their faith. The nation in which Christians experience the worst treatment is North Korea, which ranked number 1 for the 17th year in a row on Open Doors' most recent list of countries where Christians are persecuted. Christianity is not only seen as opium of the people, as a normal for all communist states, it is also seen as deeply Western and despicable. Christians try to hide their faith as far as possible to avoid arrest and being sent to a labor camp. Open Doors reported. North Korean Christians face horrors such as being hung on crosses over fire, forced into labor camps, crushed under steamrollers, imprisoned, herded off bridges, and trampled underfoot. In such Middle Eastern countries as Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Pakistan, Christians face daily torment from Muslims enforcing Islamic Sharia law, which calls for jihad against non-Muslims. Christians in these countries suffer under heavy taxation, imprisonment, torture, and beheading. In Iraq and Syria, ISIS, the Islamic State, has almost completely obliterated the area's Christian population. Christian persecution is nothing new. Though the number of believers affected is higher than ever, Christians have faced persecution since the birth of the church. Under the wicked emperors Nero and Diocletian, early Christians were stoned to death, crucified, burned at the stake, torn apart by wild animals, sawn in two, skinned alive, and more. Jesus' words to the persecuted church in Smyrna encouraged many early believers to endure, and they continue to provide hope to persecuted Christians today. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life, from Revelations 2:10. The crown of life is a special heavenly reward the Lord will give to those who endure persecution. Matthew 5:11 and 12.
Thank you, Melanie. I want to close this simply by bringing you up to this very date, this very hour. While we've had some frightful episodes recently, for example, 21 people were killed in a Coptic church in Morocco recently. And we all remember those 21 men who were beheaded in Libya. And in Kenya, 46 were killed at the college, university there. And a bus, just a simple bus was stopped. The passengers divided into two groups. The Christians were killed. Boko Haram has been active in Nigeria. Now, Mary Louise and Pete have a daughter at Jos. And she's in the midst of all this. Can you believe that since January, just January, February, and March in Nigeria, where we lived for 3 years, 1,061 people, Christians, men, women, and children, have been killed by the Fulani. Is anyone here aware of such carnage? Over 1,000 people killed by herders really a genocide. In Sierra Leone, they are trying to live peaceably. Sierra Leone is one of the stars of this world in living together. They are really trying to be at peace with one another. And when Ebola struck, religious leaders from all faiths in Sierra Leone got together and they called it the Religious Leaders Task Force for Ebola. And together they went into imams and pastors went into schools and mosques and churches to try to teach people how to avoid contracting Ebola. Truly, Sierra Leone is a hopeful place in this world, and we have had the privilege of ministering in that country. When I first came to Sierra Leone, there were 9,000 members of our church. 9,000. I asked Bishop Yamasu recently, how many members are there in the United Methodist Church now? Well, he says there are 275,000 members. Where is the 9,000 in my lifetime? And in Nigeria, when I left in 1955, we had 6 little churches with a membership of 900 baptized people. I had opportunity to go back to Nigeria some 45 years later to do some eye surgery. And I asked, how many United Methodists are there now? And the bishop said, well, we have over 700,000 United Methodists. In spite of persecution, danger, nakedness, and sword, we have been warned that we will be persecuted, but that the church is victorious because Christ rose. They crucified my Savior. Together, let's say it. That first verse. They crucified my Savior and nailed him to the tree. They crucified my Savior and nailed him to the tree. They crucified my Savior and nailed him to the tree. But the Lord shall bear my spirit home. The Lord shall bear my spirit home. He rose. He rose. He rose. He rose from the dead. He rose. He rose. He rose. He rose from the dead. He rose. He rose. He rose. He rose from the dead. And the Lord shall bear my spirit home. Help us out, Linda. They
crucified my Savior and nailed him to the tree. They crucified my Savior